Yo soy abogada Farakazi, la dueña del bufete de inmigración aquí en Chicago. Y ahora yo pregunto a usted que si usted tiene hijos que están en detención, por favor, llámanos ahora a 630-504-0648. El resto de este video es en inglés y después pudimos que traducir en español también, porque este es un tópico muy importante. So, hello everyone, this is attorney Farah Kazi. I am the owner of Kazi Law here in Chicago. I have clients all over the country and really all over the world. But I am talking to you today about kids that are in detention centers. If you remember, maybe about it seems like forever ago, but maybe it was a year ago when there were pictures that were splashed across the media of cages and kids being kept in cages, and there was this outcry and people were very upset, and all of that, there were some protests and a lot of discussion about it, and yet somehow somewhere that kind of died down. And it's understandable because we ended up with a global pandemic and we had all sorts of other issues happening all at once in the year 2020. So somehow we forgot about those kids that are in detention centers, but they're still there. And there are still a lot of problems being had in those centers. And I had talked about the centers before in another video, but this one in particular is about what you can do with children in detention centers. So I'm going to explain to you what happened today, and I'm going to explain to you about a couple of the more disturbing cases that I have worked on so that you can get an idea of what exactly is going on. Today, I had a lawyer friend of mine who contacted me among other lawyers, and I am by no means an expert in this, so do not consider me to be that. I'm only telling you my experience of this. There are other people who have devoted their entire lives to this, to their professional career, to this, and they are true heroes. But what I can tell you is that kids are coming into this country and they are either coming in unaccompanied or they're coming in with their parent. And regardless of whether they come in with a parent or whether they come alone, they are still classified as unaccompanied minors. Now, that in itself should tell you that there's a problem, because obviously an unaccompanied minor should actually mean that they're unaccompanied with an adult. If they come in with a parent, they should not be categorized as unaccompanied. The reason why that's important is because then they are placed in the same processing as everybody else, which means that they are very often or not separated from that parent that they come across, and they are placed in either in a different detention center or in like a temporary foster care system. That's if they're lucky. However, now we have a policy that's in place in which the kids are immediately being deported. If they are from Mexico, they are deported within a few hours. It does not matter that they came into this country under gruesome circumstances and are actually actively fleeing violence or persecution in their country. They land over here, they ask for asylum, they talk to somebody, and then they are sent right back to that same country that they just fled from, alone, not with an adult. So that's what happened today. My attorney friend contacted me in a listserv and just mentioned it to all of us and said, what do I do? And her client was frantic because her client's husband and her 15-year-old daughter had crossed over. They had come from El Salvador, gone to Mexico, then crossed over, asked for asylum because the cartel, the local gangs, were actively hunting and looking for them. And they had a legitimate reason to come over here. Remember, seeking asylum in any country is not illegal. That is a human right afforded to all of us. So they did it the right way. There's nothing illegal about what they did. They came, they announced themselves, they declared asylum, and then they hoped that somebody would be able to help them out. But instead, they were separated, and the daughter was deported back to Mexico, not even to El Salvador, where she came from, and the cartel picked her up and kidnapped her. And now the mother has received threatening phone calls from these cartels asking for an insane amount of money for the release of both the daughter and then now the father as well. Do you see how all of this could have been avoided I mean, they did everything correctly. There was nothing that they did incorrectly in this way. And I know that there's all this debate that, we need to close the border, we need to do all these things. But if people are fleeing violence from their country and going into another country, and they are declaring at the border the way that they're supposed to, then they haven't done anything incorrectly in that way. And they have a human right to be able to go through the process at least, and at least be able to pitch their story to someone so that they can determine if they actually are eligible for asylum. But that's not the case here. And it hasn't been the case in the other cases that I've done, all of which have involved young children and minors. The youngest one that I had was a 2-year-old who was, as this one was separated from her father, placed in a detention center for 6 months, and then it took me an additional 3 months to get her out of a detention center that was separate from her father. She could barely speak, so she couldn't really understand what was going on. She had family and sponsors available for her if she were to be released, and she still was not being released. I'm just going to pause so that you can imagine the kind of trauma that would put a child through. I mean, that's traumatic for an adult, but for a child who has no understanding of what they just went through and then is thrown into a detention center or being deported or whatever it is, completely alone, it is unbelievable to me that we would be able to do this and that we continue to do this at the border. And then the last one that I'll tell you is a few months ago, I tried to help a Florida attorney who was also dealing with the same issue. And what happened was that there was a 5-year-old girl. She had come in with her mother. So notice that none of these stories, they'd actually come in alone. They had come in with their parents, were separated from their parents, and then were deported. And that 5-year-old girl was put onto a plane and sent back to her country. And she contacted me after the fact. So the process was trying to find out what in the world had happened to that little girl. And we weren't able to find her. So that did not have a happy ending. So I bring all of this to you because, first, if you are somebody who's watching this video and you have a child who's in a detention center, you need to act very, very quickly. Please, 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 please call one of the not-for-profit organizations that I'm going to put in the comments so that you can immediately, as soon as they are about to cross, contact somebody so that you can get legal representation ASAP, because without that, they will either be deported or put in the detention center for an indeterminate amount of time, and you need as much help as possible. Call my office at 630-504-0648. I am trained to do this. I have staff that is trained to do this, but I'm also not, like I said, I'm not an expert. I do what I can because I've done so many cases of these now, unfortunately, but I do it because I see a tremendous human rights violation that is occurring here, and I want to put an end to it. So whatever you can do to get the word out, please let people know they need to get some legal help so that they can make sure that their children are protected here at the border. And I'm going to have this transcribed and translated into Spanish and sent over to my Spanish-speaking audience as well. And please feel free to like and share it. And if you have further questions, give our office a call. We handle all sorts of immigration, including deportation defense, including removal procedures, and including detention work. So 630-504-0648. Thank you.